This podcast is sponsored by Murgitroyd, intellectual property attorneys. For more information on today's guest and our company, visit murgitroyd.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the fourth season of Murgitroyd's Innovation Talks podcast. We're delighted you've joined us. If you have any questions, you can email us at innovation.talks@murgitroyd.com or via @Murgitroyd on Twitter. And please remember to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. So let's go straight into today's podcast.
Hi there, I'm Holly Cameron. I'm a trainee trademark attorney in Murgitroyd's Aberdeen office. I'm here today with Terry Devlin. Hi Terry.
Hi Holly.
So Terry, let's discuss today IP audits and in particular the benefits of an IP audit to our client.
Well, IP audits, there would be a number of benefits. Perhaps the most important benefit would be that it helps a client identify in a systematic way the existing intellectual property in their organisation. And by intellectual property, I mean possibly patentable technology, trademarks or brands that they may have, designs which would relate to aesthetic creations, also secret know-how. That's information which is best kept out of the public domain and within the company only, and also copyright for any literary works.
And can you give us a few examples of some of the IP audits you've taken part in?
Well, it's something we do quite regularly. A lot of clients receive funding from local government via the UK Patent Office to conduct IP audits. Whenever Murgitroyd company do an IP audit, generally speaking, we within the audit do patentability search if the client has technology that they're considering patenting. So we're able to determine what the state of the art is and determine whether or not a patent application should be filed and what possible protection that could give them.
So tell me about some of the other benefits of an IP audit.
Well, one benefit is that it helps a client manage IP. A client might be a startup company and they might not have a full handle of what IP they've got or what IP they may wish to develop. Other clients can be long established and have a whole range of IP in the various different ways. And it helps identify that. They can list it out in schedules. They can understand the importance of this IP, how it may be of relevance to what they're doing at the moment, or how it may be of relevance to what they propose to do in the future. And they can also then make assessment of how important each piece of IP is, whether or not they should register it, if it was a brand name, for example, or if it is a piece of technology, do they want to patent it? And in the meantime, keep these things secret. And it also can help them identify what IP they might have, but they no longer have a use for. It may be obsolete. They could potentially sell it or license it away.
Great. So tell me a wee bit about the process for conducting an IP audit.
Well, it can happen in a number of ways. We can visit a client or a client can come to us. We can work from a questionnaire, which can have 60 or 70 questions running through the various different types of IP that the client may have that we may be setting out to identify. Once we go through the questionnaire, which also asks the questions about core markets in terms of countries where they may wish to operate or where they export to or where they're looking to export to or where they're possibly trying to find customers, and about any licenses they might have, any agreements they might be involved in or any non-disclosure agreements. We take a look at all that information and we prepare an IP audit document. As I mentioned earlier, if they have technology that's at an early stage and they are considering a patent or patent protection for it, we will have the patentability search carried out by our in-house search team, who are experts in this field, and that will help us give the client a view of whether a patent is a worthwhile thing for them to do. Sometimes it can also identify patents or intellectual property that exists that could be a barrier for our client and that they must be aware of in order not to infringe people's rights. So that can be a very beneficial byproduct of a patentability search.
So what form does this IP audit report take?
Well, we generally break it down into sections, each section relating to the various types of IP that we are looking for or which the client may have or may need to acquire. And again, that's patentable technology, trademarks, designs, secret know-how, and copyright. We make recommendations in each one of these categories, explaining in short form what they have and what we recommend they do. In the longer, more detailed section, we go through each of these areas of intellectual property in detail, explaining the background of it, the meaning of it, the effect of it, the usefulness of it, and again, recite what we think is best served by the client in terms of how they manage it. Throughout the document, there'll be a series of recommendations numbered, which can easily reach 30 or 40 recommendations, specific points for them to address, which together can form an annex of the document, which would basically be an IP strategy document for the company to have, which they can keep and use to educate their staff about all the points of consideration in IP. One big area is how to identify IP in an organisation, because the audit is it's like a first stage, but then the client should, going forward, as part of their IP management procedure, educate their staff on the process of helping identify IP. Otherwise, things could be developed that have a value, but the value is never captured and can walk out the door, or which a competitor could do before they do it.
So what other purposes does this IP audit have?
Well, we have a lot of clients who then can take the recommendations of the IP audit, in particular where the recommendation is to protect some aspect of their IP, and that can be very useful for them to obtain funding from some of the grant bodies, the public bodies, which will fund or possibly fund them in securing IP for the things which are important to their business. As well as that, it will include a schedule of IP assets that will be a detailed list of assets that the client has, and if they are registered assets, when renewals are due, and they can have costing information, so they can use that to project further in the future. But it's also a very useful document because it ties in all of their IP, which can be very useful to create value when presented to a possible investor for them to see what this client has in terms of assets.
Okay, so does the IP audit cover ownership?
Well, it's a very good question, because a client, company or organisation could have intellectual property that was not necessarily created entirely in-house by their own employees, because in that situation it's generally fairly straightforward to determine who the owner is. Usually it would be the client company if the IP was devised by their employees. However, in many cases, clients have to look to outside expertise, for example, in terms of providing technical solutions to the problems they're trying to solve, or for branding companies or another company they might have to engage to manufacture. So in these situations, ownership is not always so clear-cut. So we are able to look at agreements, and we can also apply their situation to the relevant IP law to help them determine who owns what and what they should do in order to make the ownership of the IP theirs, as in to help them assign the rights in anything that's created by a contractor or a third party on their behalf to the client themselves.
Great, thanks Teddy. The IP audit sounds like such a valuable tool for a business mapping out its IP.
Yes, it can be. And thanks very much for your questions.
Thanks for your time today. We hope you found today's podcast valuable. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future episodes. So until the next time, goodbye.
Our business is founded on trust and collaboration. The subjects we choose for our podcasts are topical and informative. We are always looking for suggestions for new topics for discussion, so if there's an area of IP that you're keen to understand better, please drop us a line at innovation.talks@murgitroyd.com.